acho que tá todo mundo culpado nessa situação. Eu acho que tá todo mundo culpado nessa situação. Eu acho que... Eu quero saber, tipo assim, quem processou eles, tá ligado? Tipo assim, alguém olhou a garota morrendo, acho que foi tipo a lei, né? Tipo, eu não manjo direito, então tipo, a lei, a garota morreu, aí foram investigar as causas da morte, né? Polícia, CSI. E aí falaram assim, ah não, porra, essa garota, tá ligado? Ela tá... Tô com... meio escuro. Essa garota, ela morreu meio suspeita, tá ligado? Vamos processar essa galera aí.
To discuss a case of demonic possession so chilling and controversial that it actually became the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. What follows is the true story that inspired that, The Exorcism of Annalise.
Pô, já li esse livro de...
It's one of the few like actual cases of
já li esse livro da possessão da Emily Rose.
Like, sue the demon?
You'll find out.
Okay.
Born in 1952 in the small town of Klingenberg in Bavaria, Germany, Annalise Michel was raised as a strict Catholic and was described as in September 1968, when Annalise was 16 years old, she experienced her first episode of losing consciousness. And later that night, she felt as if something was pressing down on her chest, pinning her to her bed.
Isso aí chama asma, pô. Asma, tá ligado? Quando bate aquela arma que tu fica...
Her mother took Annalise to their family doctor, Dr. Vogt, and a neurologist, Dr. Luthi, who examined her and even ran an EEG.
As imagens, parece o Rick do The Walking Dead, tá ligado?
Brain scan, but found nothing wrong. They hypothesized that it could possibly be a form of seizure. Over the next 3 years, Annalise would have 2 more similar episodes and was prescribed 2 medications, an anticonvulsant medication and an anti-seizure medication called Dilantin. On both occasions, the EEG would come back normal, with some minor irregular patterns, but nothing that would definitively explain her symptoms.
What year was this?
Por que tu tá desmaiando assim? Porra, ó, eu nunca desmaiei na vida, então eu não sei o que faz uma pessoa desmaiar. Na verdade eu sei, mas tipo assim, como eu nunca desmaiei na vida, isso sempre foi meio que tipo um mito assim na minha vida. Então, por exemplo, eu já passei mal de ficar com falta de ar, já passei mal por diversos motivos. Esse não foi um deles. Cara, manter a Comic Sans.
Okay. Little spiders on me. Sorry if I blew it on you.
Well, you did.
It was in spring 1973 that things took a turn for the stranger. Annalise began to hear knocking sounds in her bedroom. Sounds her sisters would hear as well. Even more alarming.
Tava a quarta irmã assim na parede, tac, tac, tac. Tá ligado?
Annalise also reported hearing a voice damning her to hell. Her mother was further rattled when she witnessed Annalise furiously staring at a statue of the Virgin Mary with, quote, eyes turned black, jet black, and her hands seemed to turn into thick paws with claws.
Os olhos dela viraram Jack Black.
Paws on her daughter. Uh-oh.
You know what? Let's move on. Let's not get caught up on the bare hands.
On the bare hands.
Yeah, we can't move past her.
Não vamos ficar, não vamos ficar presos nas mãos do urso.
I knew you weren't gonna like that. I'm just gonna move past.
She had little kitty cat paws.
In September 1973, in a neurological visit with Dr. Luthi,
Dr.
Annalise described horrific visions of demon faces that were tormenting her, and stated that she felt the devil was inside her. She also reported smelling something that had the aroma of burnt feces, a stench that many around her would report smelling at later times.
Why do all these people know what burnt feces smells like?
Eu sei como é que é o cheiro de merda queimada, porque eu já explodi já explodi um tolete de cocô de cachorro, uma bombinha. Então, eu tenho minha desculpa. Essa é a minha desculpa. É muito específico esse cheiro de merda queimada, muito.
Fuck, is that a bee? See what you get? This is what you get.
Caralho. Eu era com medo de abelha. Pô, eu sou alérgico a abelha, não posso falar nada não. Eu correria tranquilamente também. Também correria tranquilamente. Jesuíta.
Yeah, that's a bad doctor.
Yeah, I mean, if he said that,
don't go see it.
That's fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not that's true, the family definitely searched for...
Tu vai entrar no médico com sintoma de resfriado e obstrução nasal e o médico fala assim, vai num jesuíta, né?
Priest.
Vai num pastor.
And eventually found a priest named Father Alt. In November 1973, Annalise met with a psychiatrist who diagnosed her as a neurotic with possible epilepsy, and another neurologist found she had, quote, epileptic patterns, and took her off Dilantin, a much stronger drug. In July 1975, Annalise's extremely odd behavior worsened. She barely slept and prayed fervently all night. She
imagino que essa seja a casa dela.
and even licked her own urine on the floor. She destroyed rosaries, crucifixes, and holy pictures on the walls. Annalise also exhibited strength that was, quote, close to superhuman, throwing her sister, quote, as if she were a rag doll, and incredibly was observed effortlessly squeezing an apple with one hand until, quote, fragments exploded throughout the room.
I bet I could squeeze an apple till it exploded.
I bet you $1 million you couldn't.
Here we go. I mean, this is Germany. This is before preservatives.
You hear that in the distance? It's the excuse train coming.
Wait for it.
Eu acho que eu poderia explodir uma maçã.
But now you
Acho que
get
eu
to see
conseguiria.
2 hands.
What? She definitely used 2 hands.
You said 1 hand.
But still, that's not like an amazing metric.
A priest named Father Rodewick, a man considered an expert on exorcisms by his peers, reported that he was convinced that Annalise was possessed, and after deliberation with the bishop, an exorcism on...
A gente tem que conversar como é que funciona isso de deliberar que alguém está possuído. A pessoa recebe algum tipo de hora extra ou compensação. Bah, fulano tá possuído. Toma aqui, pra fazer hora extra.
Annalise was formally
Tá entendendo onde eu quero chegar?
approved. It was to be carried out by a priest named Father Renz. On September
Ah, essas imagens de banco.
24th,
Olha.
1975, the first exorcism rite was performed. Father Renz allowed some of the exorcism sessions to be recorded, and 42 audio recordings of the exorcisms were made in total. I'm gonna play some clips from those recordings, but fair warning, these recordings are perhaps the most disturbing pieces of audio.
Puta que pariu. A gente vai ouvir, clã? Vamos ver.
I've ever heard.
Puta que pariu. Vou tirar o fone.
You know, she's screaming. She's giving it 110%.
I mean, do you think that sounds like it came out of a girl? Like,
Yes, it sounds like a girl doing a funny
moral.
voice.
you're unrelenting
Mano, sebo nas canelas, viado.
skepticism is
Tá
exhausting.
maluco.
It drains me of all happiness and energy, and I hope you know that.
Sebo nas canelas demais. Caralho.
That's all. We're all here. It's all I ran out of people to
É a festa, tá ligado? É o Legião,
The
porra.
blonde man from
Legião
Die Hard
Urbana.
is also in here.
Urbana,
Skeletor
e da
from
mulher.
Masters of the Universe. Heath Ledger's
mano,
Joker.
Caralho.
Not Jack Nicholson. He was too cartoonish.
Cara, tão
You had your
perdendo
fun,
ali.
Yeah, I've had my fun.
Okay.
Annalise also named Fleischmann as one of her demons and provided accurate details of the real Fleischmann, who was a priest in the 1500s that was kicked out of the church for bad behavior. These details came as an icy shock to Father Alt, who claims Annalise would have no way of knowing Fleischmann.
That is the
Fleischmann.
only thing that is strange to me. All the other stuff is just things that a person could do.
To learn more about demonic possession, we sat down with Father Gary Thomas, a Vatican-approved exorcist, who explained to us different signs of possession. All of
Cara,
these.
tipo assim, eu acho esse papo muito louco, tá ligado? Eu acho esse papo bem louquinho.
Annalise had.
One would be an aversion to the
Não um louco tipo, ah, eu não acredito. Um louco de tipo assim, mano, é um bagulho louco. Eu acho que é um bagulho louco, tá ligado? Um bagulho loucura.
sacred. So a person walks in this church and can't look at a crucifix, and you only see the whites of their eyes. Another would be knowledge of hidden things, where the demon will begin to tell you things about yourself that the person themselves would have no way of knowing. Another would be possessing a kind of inordinate physical strength they don't normally possess. The last sign is sort of epileptic-like seizures on a person's face and the movement of their arms and legs in a way where they lose control.
By May, Annalise became even worse, banging her head against the wall and biting herself and others, to the point where her family had to tie her up to prevent her from hurting herself. But most dangerously, Annalise refused to eat.
Aí é pica.
She described it as, quote, not being permitted to eat. Despite being quite frail, likely weighing under 80 pounds, she exhibited great strength when people tried to restrain her.
Yeah, I just feel bad for her at this point.
Yeah, I do feel bad for her.
She's definitely tortured.
She used a doctor visit, even though she had Annalise had another exorcism, only saying please, absolution. The next morning, her family went to her room and found her dead. Despite seeking medical attention early on, Annalise refused to submit to medical attention in the end, as she and her family ultimately placed all faith of recovery into the exorcisms. She died of starvation at the age of 23 after 67 exorcisms, weighing only 68 pounds at the time of her death.
Do you think that just made her buy into it more? If people started to exercise me on the reg,
Exercising you in the reg?
yeah, I might eventually be like, I guess I'm demons.
I would agree with that frame of mind, but Annalise's belief that she was possessed predates
all
the exorcisms or the priests or any of that stuff.
After her death, Annalise's parents and the two priests were accused of negligent homicide, and the case went to trial in 1978. What follows are the two sides of that case. First, let's review the position of the defense. The defense presented eyewitness testimony and formally submitted the recordings as evidence of possession, an idea that the court never seemed to take seriously. From a non-religious standpoint, the defense argued Annalise was permitted to deny medical treatment, as was her lawful right. For what it's worth, medical treatment might have included tranquilizing her, force-feeding her, and electroshock therapy.
Cara, terapia de eletrochoque é um bagulho que já dá uma catinguelada assim na mente, né, mano? Porque é foda, terapia de eletrochoque é um bagulho meio pesado. Aí, tira isso aqui.
Quote, all presumably against her will, end quote. Family friend Thea Hine recalled in her testimony that in 1976, a few months before Annalise's death, Annalise reportedly, quote, begged on her knees for Hine to not suggest medical attention to anybody. Also worth noting is the fact that Father Alt actually looked for medical help towards the end. And on May 30th, his friend, Dr. Richard Roth, visited Annalise out of what he claims was scientific curiosity and not as a physician.
He just was like, look, I'm not here as a doctor.
O maluco chegando falando, cara, eu não tô aqui pra ajudar, eu tô aqui pelo entretenimento, tá ligado? E puxa ele um balde de pipoca.
I just want to see some of this crazy shit.
I know, who fucking says that?
I want to see this girl eat some spiders.
That's like something you say when you go to the zoo, not when you go see someone that's tied up.
That is a bad man right there.
Okay.
In his visit, Dr. Roth claims Annalise had no external injuries, although Father Renz noted she had several bruises, a swollen cheek, and black eyes. An interesting contradiction, to say the least. Dr. Roth also denied saying, quote, there are no...
Eu acho que tá todo mundo culpado nessa situação. Eu acho que... Eu quero saber, tipo assim, quem processou eles, tá ligado? Tipo assim, alguém olhou a garota morrendo, acho que foi tipo a lei, né? Tipo, eu não manjo de direito, então tipo, a lei, a garota morreu. Aí foram investigar as causas da morte, né? Polícia, CSI. E aí falaram assim, ah não, porra, essa garota, tá ligado? Ela tá... Tô com... meio escuro. Essa garota, ela morreu meio suspeita, tá ligado? Vamos processar essa galera aí.
Injections against the devil, end quote.
Shady as fuck.
Yeah.
Curiously, in spite of all the supposed epileptic attacks, an autopsy revealed Annalise had a healthy brain with no damage that could have caused epileptic seizures. Quote, not even on a microscopic level, end quote.
What say you to that?
I mean, you know,
Tipo assim, óbvio, ela tava morta, botaram o cérebro dela numa lâmina aí.
What's a brain scientist?
A neurologist?
Neurologist.
Sorry, it's been a long day. I'm not a neurologist. I don't know.
It's funny that you said that because the neurologist said the exact same thing.
He said I'm not a neurologist?
Ah, tu chega lá e fala, pô, você é um neurologista, preciso de neurologista. E fala, não.
Probably it sounds like it. You might as well.
Look, I don't fucking know.
I don't know. Go visit a Jesuit.
Tipo, Ah, mano.
Just get your shit out of my office.
And even more curious was the court's seeming non-consideration of facts, such as her pupils being unusually dilated and the absence of ulcers on her body, which are frequently found in victims of starvation.
Okay, all right.
Any quotes on that?
I mean, you know.
This is great. The tables have turned, in my opinion.
Now, let's review the position of the prosecution. The prosecution argued that Annalise had epilepsy and psychosis, and that the parents and 2 priests were liable for failing to act to save her life.
Agora é o lado da galera
Defense
que
tore
processou
down
eles.
notions of possession. They questioned the credibility of Father Alt, with the conclusion from 2 experts that Father Alt exhibited signs of schizophrenia.
Whoa, what?
Aí é foda. Quem vigia os vigilantes?
Oh, whoa!
Yeah, that's weird.
That's weird.
He wasn't the guy that was doing the exorcisms, but he was the guy that initially helped Annalise in the beginning.
The prosecution also argued that the medications given successfully suppressed the epilepsy-like seizures, and argued that that suppression morphed into, quote, a delusional psychosis associated with epilepsy, end quote. They argued that Annalise's psychosis was
Cara, esses advogados parece que eles queriam muito ganhar, tá ligado? Parece que eles queriam muito ganhar.
exacerbated by the exorcism, which only played into her fantasy. To piggyback on that, Annalise often went through phases between exorcisms where she behaved normally, even though she would behave as a possessed person during exorcisms. It's unclear if the epilepsy-like seizures were stopped by medication or if they actually stopped on their own. But Annalise's psychotic visions predate the alleged medical suppression.
Weird.
Weird.
Sorry.
Basically,
That
they're
looks
saying
strange.
that the psychosis was brought on by the suppression of the drugs.
Yeah.
But this psychosis
happened.
predates the drugs. Exactly.
In the end, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution.
Caralho. Parece que a galera tá inventando muita historinha, tá ligado? Pra poder fazer tudo encaixar.
Sentencing the 4 defendants to 6 months in prison with suspension for 3 years and payment for all court costs. The court ruled that Annalise was unable to make decisions for herself and should have been forced to submit to medical care.
No final ficou elas por elas, né? Tirando a cadeia. Isso
Professor
sim.
Felicitas D. Goodman, an author of a book on the case, notes the theories that Annalise was epileptic were presented as, quote, a statement of undisputable fact, not conjecture, as in fact they had been, end quote.
How do you tell the difference between possession and mental health?
Sometimes both are going along side by side. You have to determine what is the root cause.
A cara dos caras dele, tipo assim. Tipo, que porra é essa que tu tá falando, mano?
What is the root cause of the suffering of this individual? You start out with a discernment, and the discernment involves myself and a whole team of people. I have a medical doctor, a clinical psychologist, and a psychiatrist. In fact, a formal exorcism only happens as the last resort.
Given the evidence that we've seen,
Então é tipo assim, eles chamam os Vingadores da Saúde Mental. Tem um padre, tem um de tudo, né? Um de cada, assim, pra não dar merda. E aí no final não deu certo, todo mundo dá as mãos e fala assim, irmão, exorcismo. Pode pá, exorcismo, exorcismo.
and all the strange occurrences and the voices, I think there is sufficient evidence to not conclusively rule out that she was possessed beyond a reasonable doubt.
Sure.
So you acknowledge that.
I acknowledge there's a lot of factors in this case. I personally think there's something going on with mental health, and I also think that 67 exorcisms probably don't leave your mind in a good spot.
I could see both sides. I could see how it
Exatamente.
would be mental health. I could see how it would be possession. I lean towards possession.
Tipo assim,
That being said,
67
she should've gone to
exorcismos,
the
tá
hospital.
ligado?
Get that girl to a hospital,
She's
please.
possessed or not, fucking force her to go to the hospital and let the doctors be like, holy shit, the shit's floating around.
Os médicos falaram, não, realmente, o laudo dela, o atestado.
Don't take him to an exorcist. Take him to an exorcist, but do it at the hospital.
No, don't take them straight to the hospital.
You can do both.
Porra, esse vídeo me deixou cagadíssimo, tá? Eu não queria falar nada, não. Mas esse vídeo me deixou bem cagadinho, mano.